200 feet below the surface in the suffocating grip of a radioactive cave, Navy Lieutenant Murray Anderson found himself locked in a desperate struggle for survival. What began as a daring exploration of the unknown would turn into an unrelenting nightmare. This descent into Radium Springs would mark the first documented tragedy in cave diving, a haunting chapter in the stories we uncover here on Shadows of Tragedy. Murray Anderson, at 28, was not only a Navy lieutenant, but also the leader of the Macon, Georgia Skin Diving Club. His friend, Donald Garu, was a fellow thrill-seeker and frequent diving partner. Together, they shared a passion for adventure and a determination to explore Georgia's underwater cave systems. On March 15, 1955, these two set out on what would be their most ambitious journey yet, to map the uncharted depths of Radium Springs. Radium Springs was Georgia's largest natural spring, a striking pool with a radiant blue hue caused by radium in the water. But this wasn't just any dive site. Radium Springs got its name for a reason. The water's unique bluish glow was caused by radium, an element 1,000 times more radioactive than uranium. In the early days, people thought these waters held healing properties, but prolonged exposure was later found to cause anemia, cataracts, cancer, and severe bone damage. Beneath its peaceful surface lay a 1,500-foot maze of twisting passages that demanded respect, offering no mercy to the unprepared. In the 1950s, cave diving was seen as an extremist sport, its appeal limited to the bold few. Despite its allure for thrill seekers, many chose to stay far from its dangers. But Radium Springs had been on Anderson's radar for months, and he was determined to make history by uncovering its hidden passages. On that fateful day, the pair made their final preparations, arriving at the site in the morning. Their homemade gear took hours to assemble, and by midday, Anderson and Garu were ready. They took one last look above before descending into the crystal-clear waters toward the concealed 3-foot opening at the bottom of the springs, their only light coming from handmade flashlights. As the two descended, their surroundings quickly changed from light to shadow. The beauty of the submerged cavern was mesmerizing, with narrow passages and looming rock formations that seemed to extend endlessly. Moving deeper, Anderson and Garu navigated cautiously, their flashlights casting faint beams that illuminated only a few feet ahead. Whether out of haste or oversight, Anderson and Garu made a critical choice. They did not set up a guideline at the cave's entrance. In a cave like Radium Springs, where heavy sediment could cloud visibility in an instant, a guideline was considered essential. Yet, motivated by the thrill of exploration, the pair pressed forward, determined to reach the unexplored depths. Due to the cave's tight spaces, they had to swim close to the ceiling, angling their fins sideways to avoid agitating the thick sediment layer that blanketed the cave floor. Anderson and Garu moved with care. Yet, as they explored, they unknowingly made several critical mistakes that would soon lead to catastrophe. Reaching the end of their guideline, Garu signaled to Anderson that he was ready to return. But Anderson, driven by ambition, signaled his friend to continue without him. The two made a fateful decision to part ways. Separation in a cave this dangerous was a choice they would later realize was fatal. Determined to find the rumored beauty of the unexplored passages, Anderson pressed forward alone. Straying from the guideline, he ventured toward a narrow, uncharted tunnel, believing this path would lead him to his goal. Meanwhile, Garu had already turned back, carefully retracing their route to the surface, unaware of the grave mistake they had just made by separating. Alone in the depths, Anderson explored multiple passages, sweeping his homemade flashlight from side to side in search of familiar markers. Yet, the further he swam, the more treacherous his path became. Frustration began to set in as visibility worsened. Despite the growing uncertainty, he pressed onward, driven by the hope that each new turn would reveal the mysterious formations he had imagined. But his persistence came at a cost. He stirred up thick layers of sediment along the cave floor, transforming the once clear water into a murky, impenetrable cloud. Lost and disoriented, Anderson's calm determination started to falter as he realized he was trapped in a claustrophobic nightmare with no clear way out. If you're finding this story intriguing, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more captivating content. Realizing the dangers of pushing further into the dark, disorienting labyrinth, Anderson finally decided it was time to turn back. But just as he tried to retrace his steps, disaster struck. Anderson's flashlight died, leaving him in utter darkness. With no guideline to guide him, he was now at the mercy of the cave's cold walls. Panic consumed him as he reached out, searching for anything to lead him back. But with only silence and shadows around him, Anderson realized he was hopelessly lost. In that total darkness, the cave's walls became a prison, pressing in on him as his sense of direction dissolved. Anderson faced the grim reality of his situation. Without light, without a guide, and with dwindling air, he was alone against the unyielding depths. Back on the surface, Garu anxiously waited, his gaze fixed on the cave entrance. As the minutes turned into an hour, a deep unease settled over him. Something was terribly wrong. While Murray had always taken risks in pursuit of discovery, Garu knew his friend was also meticulous about safety. It wasn't like him to be this reckless, or to ignore the limits of his air supply. Realizing that Anderson's air tank would be running dangerously low, Garu knew time was slipping away. Without a moment to lose, he left to find help, rallying fellow divers and members of the nearby diving club. With fresh equipment in hand, they prepared to enter the murky depths and search for their missing friend, hoping they weren't too late. It was dark when the rescue team arrived at Radium Springs, and the sense of urgency weighed heavily on everyone. Donald Garu, exhausted yet resolute, prepared to dive again alongside Jim Britton and two other skilled divers, all focused on one mission: to find Murray Anderson before it was too late. With fresh equipment and flashlights cutting through the blackness, the group descended into the cave, their beams barely reaching a few inches ahead in the heavy silt. The visibility was dismal, but the team worked together, each diver meticulously following the guideline as they navigated the intricate passages. Hours passed, the cave's twisting paths offering no sign of Anderson, but still, they pressed on, driven by the slim hope that he might be close. The divers finally reached the end of the guideline, searching every inch of the surrounding passages. But it was hopeless. After hours underwater, Donald's body began to falter, his muscles aching from the relentless strain. Though he was reluctant to abandon the search, he realized he had no choice. Weighed down with exhaustion and facing the limits of his own air supply, he made the difficult decision to swim back toward the surface, knowing he might be leaving his friend behind. By the next morning, the Navy had received news of Anderson's disappearance. They immediately dispatched a team of seasoned divers from Charleston, South Carolina, to assist. By the time the Navy divers arrived on Sunday morning, nearly 20 hours had passed since Anderson had disappeared into the cave. This time, as the senior divers followed the guideline down into the depths, visibility had improved. With cautious, deliberate strokes, they navigated to the end of the line, scanning the surrounding area. Then within minutes, they found him. Anderson's lifeless body, floating near the top of the cave, just a few feet from the guideline. Their hearts sank as the devastating reality set in. Just the day before, Garu and his team had likely swum mere inches beneath Anderson's body, separated only by a wall of thick silt that had concealed him from view. At 8 a.m., the senior divers surfaced with Anderson's body, pulling him from the depths and bringing closure to a rescue effort that had spanned nearly a day. Lieutenant Murray Anderson's tragic death marked a turning point in cave diving history, becoming the first recorded cave diving fatality in the United States. His loss sent shockwaves through the diving community, prompting serious reflections on safety practices and sparking major reforms that endure to this day. Modern cave divers now rely on critical guidelines that were shaped by Anderson's story. Every diver is expected to always secure a dive line at the entrance, to have multiple flashlights, and to follow the rule of thirds. This rule, simple yet life-saving, ensures that divers carry enough air to make it down, to make it back, and to handle emergencies. But it's truly a shame that it took such a tragedy for these stricter diving rules to be put in place. Rules that have since saved countless lives. Anderson's sacrifice became the foundation for a legacy of safety, one that has turned exploration from a deadly risk into a safer endeavor. His story reminds us of the perils that lie in the depths, where beauty and danger coexist, a legacy etched into the caves themselves.